Welcome, everybody. I think we got the mid-afternoon slots. Everybody should be waking up from lunch and your second, third, fourth, fifth cup of coffee. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bob Myers. I'm the head of product for interop.io. We're a sponsor of the FDC3 standard and FINOS as a whole. Really excited to share this talk with you today. It's going to be myself and one of our senior engineers, Kalin Kostov, who's going to be talking you through really notes from the field. So the last 6 or 7 months, we've really been working closely with our clients who are, again, predominantly in capital markets with existing interoperability platforms deployed, finding ways that we can quickly and safely get AI into their users' hands. And so today is going to be a little bit of scene setting, but mostly it's going to be practical notes around how FDC3 standards can help with that process, some thoughts about ergonomic AI tool design, desktop integration, and then we'll give some examples of workflow automation that we've been able to deliver. Some very quick background on Interop, just to kind of give you an idea of who we are. We've been focused on interoperability for the better part of a decade. We're the merger of two predominant players in the interop market, Finsemble and Glue42. If you've heard our prior names, we're about 170 employees globally between New York, Charlottesville, London, and Bulgaria. Our core mission hasn't changed. We didn't become an AI company overnight, I assure you. We're still focused on application interoperability and really helping enterprises deploy FDC3-enabled interoperability platforms so that their users can have a more modern workflow and experience. That being said, we do think that the foundation that FDC3 and Interop represents is a building block which fortuitously really allows AI to participate in the enterprise workflow in a governed fashion. In terms of products, and I'm only mentioning this just to have some scene setting for the rest of the presentation, we offer an IO Connect platform, which is an FDC3 desktop agent, and much more. We've also recently, in the last 6 months, built out a Copilot framework, which builds on top of that IO Connect platform that has both front and back end components, as well as FDC3 awareness that allows our clients to deploy AI Copilots quickly and efficiently. That's really where a lot of this talk came from, working with clients to say, you've made this investment in your application ecosystem to FDC3 enable all of those solutions. The intents are well-defined, the contexts are well-defined, the application directory is well-defined. This seems like a good jumping off point for deploying AI, and it turns out that it is, but there's a lot that we didn't know when we got started, and this talk is going to talk about some of the lessons that we learned the hard way. I hope that you get to avoid those. Building for AI is not the same as building for deterministic software solutions. I think we're all realizing that as we proceed through this journey together. So the key topics we're going to cover, and then I'm going to hand it over to Kalin to really get into the meat of this. We're going to talk about LLMs and tools and really how they behave and what you should keep in mind when you're designing for LLMs and the tools that they use. We've created a golden rule of tool design, which we think is important and represents some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. You'll learn a little bit more about how AI interacts with tools. I think you'll have some surprises here. Even if you've been spending, as we have the last 6 to 9 months, deeply in this, there's really some patterns that are important to understand. If you're an FDC3 application owner, you have some obligations to the users of your applications that we want to make you aware of, things you should think about when you're deploying the FDC3 standard. And then we're going to give, I think, some fun examples of effective and not so effective building of copilots with FDC3 tools. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kalin for the bulk of our presentation.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kalin. Like Bob said, I am part of Interop.io, been part of the company for almost a decade now. And it's actually my first time at OSFF in New York, so thank you for having me. And today we'll talk about tools. And tools are incredibly important because without tools, AI today can give you answers, which if the AI is in a good mood, they'll be remotely helpful. Otherwise, they'll be hallucinated. But what we actually want from AI is to actually do stuff to help us achieve tasks. And that's where tools come in. And designing tools to be ergonomic to the AI is crucial. This means tools that are chosen by the AI at the correct moment, and they receive the correct data so that the workflow can be completed is key. And it's not as straightforward as we believed. So I'm excited to share some lessons that we learned along the way. So first off, why is this even a problem? Why are we even talking about it? The reason is that we need to connect a non-deterministic being to a deterministic part of the software. Building software forever has been very deterministic. We built our servers, endpoints, components in a way that given the same input, they'll always do the exact same thing and they'll have the exact same output every single time. They're deterministic. You can rely on them to build workflows to get the job done. But now we have LLMs sprinkled into the mix, and all of a sudden they are in the driver's seat to choose when tools need to be invoked and with what data. And as you know, as you've heard for a second day, there can be some mixed results there. So it's very undeterministic. And even to sprinkle some more extras on top, we have the human in the mix. The human is also an undeterministic player in the scene, in the fact that traditionally, when we have some software, you have some buttons. When you click a button, some flow gets triggered. That's very deterministic. You click on a row of a column, something happens, and it's very deterministic. But now, especially when we talk about in the context of assistants and chat assistants, users type there. Some of them type vaguely helpful prompts. Some of them go very descriptive. It's all mixed back out there, and that's, again, very non-deterministic. But in the end, when you draw the line, users expect to get job done, and we cannot have uncertainty there. So how do we work towards that? Well, the first thing we learned is something that we call the golden rule, and that is don't overwhelm your agent with a lot of tools. Now, what is a lot of tools? We'll hopefully get to the answer by the end of this speech, but that's the golden thing. Don't provide too many tools, and don't design tools that are atomic, that they do one singular thing very well, basically like the single responsibility thing. That's great in software design, but it's absolutely not great in designing AI tools, because when you have a lot of atomic tools, you rely on the LLM to choose the correct sequence of tools every single time and pass the correct data every single time, again and again, given a wide variety of prompts to achieve the same end result. And if you have here, for example, let's say I want to analyze the client portfolio, and I have designed my system around how we've been designing KPIs in forever, small atomic pieces. So I have get client portfolio, then I need to get the instruments for each holding, get the positions, view some analysis, and then correlate the information and maybe present it in a chart somehow. This is how we've been doing stuff forever, and we can do it because we as humans can change them deterministically. But the AI can get tripped up at any of those 5 steps, randomly. And that's very fun for us, but not so much for the users. So we figured out that designing composite tools, basically as complex as you can get away with, works best, so that they achieve workflows, and they're workflow-based and not atomic-based. The other thing that we learned is what we call the instruction manual for the AI. Basically, how does the AI figure out what tools to call? Well, it relies largely on the description. And the description of tools is extremely important, because we've always had description in software, and we, as developers, figured it out as more of a chore to create descriptions, documentation. Which developer likes creating documentation? No one. But it's especially important for AI, because that's the reason why the LLM is going to choose the tool or not. So what is a good description? Well, a good description, first of all, has clear purpose. What this tool does and how does it achieve it. Then, what is the expected input of the tool? Normally, you have input schema, but also having examples in the description goes a long way in providing more determinism. And also, when we talk about FDC3, just listing what FDC3 contexts your tool is working with speaks volumes. Next, you have also integration details when you speak about FDC3, just providing examples of what intents this code is going to be calling, what actions are going to be taken. This, again, gets chewed up by the LLM and helps make the right decisions. Last but not least, also having some examples output in the description itself is awesome. Because this, again, completes the whole picture that the LLM builds for each and every tool, and that goes a long way to be picked in the correct moment. Next, after we speak about the description, there is something that we call the conversation. And that is, once the tool gets picked by the LLM, and you've put in it the work. It's a great description, it's concise, it's on the point, it has examples, everything that LLM loves. So it gets chosen in the right moment. And then you execute the logic that the tool does. So what happens next? You need to return a response. And historically, we didn't really care to explain the response. We just returned the data, like what we have here. var 95 is 2.3. There is some stress test result. That's it. That speaks enough for the human developer, but it will be so much better if the response of the tool includes the data or the action that the tool did, and also it hints towards the next steps that are possible in this workflow. Basically, we figured out that we can treat the response of a tool as a prompt for the next steps that the LLM can take. And especially when you're designing, like, let's say, an MCP server or a Copilot solution, and you're dealing with a collection of tools, ideally we have some idea of them working together. And this is it's a game changer in terms of having this workflow more deterministically built by the LLM. So don't just return some stereo data, return the data. Also, you can provide some quick summary of what was completed and what next steps could be taken. This also goes to show how you can handle errors. Again, historically, we return error, invalid instrument, or 404, unauthorized. And we as developers, we're going to look up the documentation, figure out what went wrong, and we're going to adjust our action and try again. Well, the LLM is not really going to do that. So having the error be more descriptive, like what exactly went wrong, but most importantly, what can you do differently so that you don't get the same error output, is again massively for the LLM, because this is going to trigger the agentic flow to try again with better output than it did previously. So having a guided response and more effective, more descriptive errors is a game changer when we talk about tool design. Now, what does this mean? This is all theoretical of tool building, but let's talk for a moment about those of you that are FDC3 application builders. So you build your applications, you take advantage of the FDC3 standard, and that's great. What can you do today? Well, first off, you need to understand that you've done a lot of the hard work already. You've prepared your system to be FDC3 enabled, you have intents there, and you've done the hard work. The thing that is left for you is to really build comprehensive app definitions, following the FDC3 standard, of course. So a bad example would be having generic titles, having custom context types that you work with without any schema, and some vague names of the intents, which are definitely not standard. That's bad because people who are building the tools and presenting the FDC3 intents as tools, they don't know how to make sense of the application. Neither does the LLM. On the other side, having comprehensive definitions means having detailed application description, as described by the application definition schema, having complete intent definitions with contexts, preferably using the FDC3 defined contexts, which are not perfect, but they're good enough because at the very least they have public schemas that can be drawn in and provided to the LLM. Also, explicitly listing your result types does exactly the same thing. Or if you're using custom intents with custom data types, just make sure that there is some way for the MCP builders and tool builders to get the schema. Because if there is no input schema or output schema, basically that intent is close to useless. Next, we have some advice for the people building MCP servers and AI tools in general. The first thing is actually a mistake that we've made building the tools for our product. We were so hyped. We have this rich API. We're going to wrap each and every method of that API into tools, and we're going to provide those to the LLM, and the LLM is going to have this rich collection of tools to be able to do amazing things and make the world a better place. But what we quickly figured out was that we broke the first rule. We overwhelmed the agent. We provided way too many tools which had effects on too big of a context window, confusion of the LLM, led to hallucinations and undeterministic results. So the first thing is our advice: do not by default expose all FDC3 intents as tools. Some FDC3 intents are great. They're composite, and they can be exposed as tools by just augmenting them a little bit more with descriptions, input and output schemas. But just defaulting to all intents should be tools would lead to bad results. Why would that lead to bad results? Well, if you, regardless of what I just said, even if you have a lot of standard FDC3 intents following the standard terminology of the verbs and actions listed by the standard, you're going to end up with a large collection of intents that are very, very similar or identical. And the LLM is going to pick and choose random tools as a result of that, and leads to undeterministic workflows. So what is a better approach, in my opinion? Better approach is to identify what the workflows that users do and work from that point down to the technology. I don't really like to make a habit of myself quoting famous people, but there was a famous conference in 1997 where Steve Jobs was talking about the Mac and stuff like that, and he shared that one of the important lessons he learned is you gotta start with user experience and then figure out the technology, not the other way around. And I find it funny that almost 20 years later, we're actually at the same situation. Start with the user workflow, the experience that the users you design for, and then drill down to the underlying intents that you have available, provided from the applications. And from that point, you build the tools. So instead of having 50-odd tools, FDC3 View Instrument, ViewChart, View Contact, it's better to have Analyze Client List, Execute Trait Workflow. That will go much, much further. Now, there is also something that we can speak towards the Copilot solution architects. Basically, if you are designing the Copilot/AI assistant solution for your company, and you don't really have control of the applications or the definitions, and you don't have control of the MCP servers, we have some advice for you. Well, number one, ask the right questions. You need to know what applications you introduce into your system. Are those applications featuring good quality schemas? Are they featuring rich definitions? Basically, are they following the advices and best practices that we spoke on a couple of slides back? Because you don't want to be introducing those meaningless applications there. Next, you need to ask the right questions and do the right research in terms of tool design and MCP servers. What are you introducing? Just having an MCP server that by default picks up with all intents and wrap them as tools, like we talked about, it's not going to probably yield good results for your environment. Instead, pick servers, design tools that focus on the workflow and really design the tool flow around that. And next, just take a step back and make sure that the applications and the MCP servers both work towards this goal of achieving the overall cohesive user workflow experience. Now, this is all great, but it's a bit theoretical. So I have for you just a quick little demo. It's a recorded demo because live AI demo is never fun. Just to showcase what can go right and what can go wrong. So let me just go there. OK, so what you have here is I have a playground here that I have an agent I can play with. This agent is using the GPT-4o model. And in the first simulation, this agent has access to 5 tools. It has get client profile, get client portfolio, get instrument details, get historical price data, and ViewChart. So it's like a very small collection of tools, and I'm trying to see, in the first place, if given a mediocre prompt, will the LLM identify the flow correctly? So let's see what happens. So what is the prompt? I need to review John Smith's portfolio. Can you identify his largest holding and show me how the price has moved recently? So it's not too bad of a prompt. Definitely, if you're a prompt engineer, you can do better. But should our users be prompt engineers? Probably not. So let's see what the LLM does in this situation. OK, so the LLM identified that first it needs to call the get client profile based by the name, John Smith. Then it got its portfolio, his portfolio based on the ID he got from the profile, and then called the intent ViewChart, which is presented with a chart. And we have that Microsoft is large holding and some really basic data there. So if we have like a stereo environment with only the right amount of atomic tools, yeah, probably it will get the job done, and it's a OK starting point. But as we can see, in terms of the summary, we didn't get the recent price movement analysis. We just got a chart. So let's see, just to verify that this was not a fluke, we're going to run the exact same flow, just to see if the LLM is going to surprise us. Well, no. It's exactly the same tool choice, exactly the same summary. So let's move to another example where we have the exact same model, GPT-4o, and we have just two tools. One of them is the ViewChart tool. It's a ViewChart intent, as described in the FDC3 standard. And we have the analyzed client portfolio. So that's a composite tool, which is designed to receive the client name, do portfolio analysis internally, because it knows how to get the client ID, talk to the backend, crunch the numbers, and produce like an overview summary of largest holding, most profitable position, and stuff like that. So how is that going to perform? We have the exact same prompt. And yeah, so those two tools get chosen at the right moment, which is not really that surprising. We have just those two tools. But what do we see as a result? First, we have a bit better summary, and we get the chart. What is also happening here that we have not talked on so far is actually the cost. And cost is going to get very soon, it's even today, but soon it's going to be even a bigger topic when we talk about AI, because things cost money, there's compute here. And when we have just those two tools code to get the job done, that's less round trips to the LLM, less tokens spent on providing tools and tool results as compared to the previous one. So having composite tools also speaks volumes of reducing cost and also speed. So what happens if we go ahead and run it again, just to make sure it was not a fluke? We have the exact same prompt, exact same tools, and yep, the same output. Well, that's pretty predictable, nothing really shocking there. But now I have something better. This is what would happen if you have an environment where you connect to an app directory and you just auto-map all the intents that you get from there into tools. I'm not going to be exaggerating that when I say that we have clients that have in the hundreds of applications and in the hundreds of intents. So this is what's going to happen. And because we're in the financial space, all of them are going to sound familiar. Get client assets, get account data, get account holdings, get account info, get account investments. They're all very similar. A human being will get confused, let alone something smart or artificial. So let's see how that will fare. By the way, here he has access to exactly the same tools as previously. So we have the exact same prompt. Let's see what the LLM is going to choose. OK, so the LLM chose get client profile and analyze client portfolio. So two of the tools previously, which he didn't really need the client profile, so that's wasted cost there, wasted money. We got the historical price data, which was not needed because analyze portfolio does it. So again, wasted money. And where is my chart? No chart there. Well, I didn't specifically ask for a chart, but it would have been nice. So that's OK, but let's roll the Magic 8 Ball again. Exact same tools, exact same model, exact same prompt. Well, look at that. Now we have a different summary. We still get the client profile, but now we get the client portfolio and, again, the historical date. So yeah, it gets the job kind of done, but it's going to incur different costs, and the summary looks completely different. So let's move on to another attempt. What are we going to get this time? Oh, great. So it's pretty similar to the first try. So we get the profile and the analysis portfolio. Let's try again. Well, this time we get the profile and the portfolio and the historical price data. So it's very amusing. Every time you have the same prompt, you have different results. So one last time, fifth, what is going to be? We get the client portfolio, analysis, and we get the chart. So this is what would be actually at if you don't curate your tools, if you don't build for workflows in mind, if you don't compose them. You're going to end up with users that will be frustrated because they want to get the job done in a specific way. They like how it gets done. They've been doing it for a very, very long time. And they'll be confused. Why do I get chart sometimes? Why do I not get chart other times? Why sometimes the executive summary is rich? Why is it not? It's the exact same system. And that's the problem with too many tools. So where does this leave us? Well, let's bring Bob back up on stage to bring it home.
I always enjoy the magic 8-ball approach, but as Kalin mentioned, users don't always enjoy that too much. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, we've been working with clients. We realize we're all going through a little bit of a learning journey here in terms of what makes an effective AI deployment. We'd love to talk to you more about that. I think the takeaway here from our talk is if you've already committed to the FDC3 standard, it is a great foundation. So we're not saying anything different than that. It's got a well-defined schema that can be enriched with metadata that is core to unlocking a lot of AI's capabilities. And if you've already made that investment, you're well on the path to successfully be able to deploy co-pilots to your users. Just to recap Kalin's points, designed for workflows, I think this is a best practice pre-AI. It's still a best practice now. It's easy to have a POC that does something. Getting to production is the goal that we're all working towards, not just in our talk, but in talks over the last 2 days. And it's critical to really keep that end user experience in mind. We buried a nugget in there. I think it's a decision for each client that's deploying AI solutions to think about how much onus they want to put on the end user, how expert you want them to be in AI and how realistic that is, especially in the early days here. There's a lot of learnings to be undertaken, prompt engineering. We think it's best to make sure that the user experience is thought through by the architects of the system. Rich metadata, use FDC3, use the schemas in the app directory for intents, for context, and then really think about the intelligent orchestration of those tools. Composite tools, we may be talking about something different when we get together next year in New York, but we think that's a great way to add some intelligent orchestration for more deterministic outcomes. So if you're using FDC3, you're off to a great start here. I think we have time for some questions, so if Kalin, if you want to come back up, we can open the floor. We're happy to take any questions, or you can come stop by and see the interrupt booth. We'd be happy to talk to you there.
Did you try to use like glossaries or dictionaries to explain some of the tools or some of the responses so the LLM had more information to allow it to understand the response better or to understand which tool to select better?
I'm just going to repeat the question so that's on the record. So do we use glossaries or descriptions of the tools as information that the LLM had when it was doing the tool selection?
Well, yeah, in our particular case, when we hook up to an application application directory, we get all of the data that the developers have listed there, description, all of that thing, and we use additional processing to better understand and map that to actionable tools to present a more optimized overall description for the tool. Because just describing a tool, a human describing the tool goes a long way, but then having LLM as a judge and in an evaluation process to really fine-tune can reduce the size of the description while still keeping the same results, which reduces cost. So we didn't use glossaries, but we used LLM into the mix to process the application definitions after we get them.
Cool. Thanks for the question. Anybody else? All right, we got a question right here.
Struggling to think about because Microsoft may expose it at a system level, different browsers.
Sure.
Now are building it in. Like, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the question was, as a desktop agent, where do we think about co-pilots living in that ecosystem? I mean, certainly when we've built out our co-pilot, it is an FDC3 enabled, an interop enabled application, which allows you to pick up things that maybe a generic co-pilot from Microsoft wouldn't. So it's context aware, it listens to channels, it has those same understandings as any FDC3 enabled application. I think for us, MCP is a very loaded category when you talk about tools. So a lot of people are talking about that as a data source, an MCP, to pull in additional data and context for an LLM. For us, and certainly for users of the FDC3 standard, I think we encourage folks to think about that as a way to take actions across those applications that are already participating in the desktop. So I don't have a crystal ball more than anybody else, but I'd say there's a lot of workflows that can be unlocked from searching for applications and workflows and being able to drive or pilot those experiences and take action that a co-pilot that's inside the desktop agent can allow you to do today. So I certainly think there are value in broader co-pilots, but the application directory and being able to control all the applications that participate in a desktop agent is a great starting point and potentially gets you out the gate a lot faster than something that's external or more generic in terms of taking actions on applications. Thanks for the question. Cool.
Where does a firm start if they're looking to deploy AI across their workflows just generally? Does that come with like cleaning up their data first, or like where would you lead them to actually get the ball rolling for something like this?
Yeah, where does somebody get started? I mean, I would encourage folks to think about something like the FDC3 standard as a way to get started. Our basic idea here, or our perspective, is that you need a single application fabric to take action. Proliferating co-pilots and AI deployments across vendor solutions, and each individual application is almost certainly going to come with technical debt and a burden down the road. So if you do have the opportunity to start with a blank piece of paper, I would say just think about standards like FDC3 that are metadata rich, that allow you to provide AI with what it needs. That's how I would get started, is committing to that type of standard. Cool. And I think we are done at time. Thank you in the back. Appreciate everybody's time. We'll talk to you at the booth.